The night was supposed to be flawless, polished to perfection like every other prestigious Hollywood event that had preceded it. The 27th Television Hall of Fame honoree ceremony carried with it a reputation that was almost sacred within the industry. The red carpet shimmered under the glare of lights, publicists moved like shadows behind their clients, and the clicking of cameras filled the air like an endless drum roll. For stars and legends alike, this was not just an event. It was a moment of recognition, the kind that immortalized names in history. Viola Davis, one of the most respected and accomplished actresses of her generation, was among those being honored. The night was hers to shine, but fate had another scene to script, a moment so unscripted, so raw, that it eclipsed the polished perfection of Hollywood's facade. Meghan Markle, the Duchess who once seemed destined to conquer both royal courts and Hollywood screens, walked into that arena with a plan. Yet in front of cameras and countless witnesses, she would face one of the most humiliating rejections of her life. Picture the setting: Viola Davis standing with poise, every inch of her embodying grace and accomplishment, the cameras flashing endlessly as she was ushered toward her interviews and photo moments. Then, from the crowd, Meghan Markle approached, her presence loud not because of applause, but because of the silence that followed her steps. It was the kind of silence where people strained to hear what happens next. Meghan's face carried the trained smile of a woman who had spent years learning how to perform under pressure, but behind her eyes was a determination. This was her chance to align with Viola, to position herself shoulder to shoulder with one of Hollywood's true icons. A photo with Viola would mean validation, the kind of association that could not be questioned. But instead of the warm acknowledgement Meghan expected, she received words that cut through the air like a knife. Viola, calm but firm, looked at her and reportedly said, "I don't know you." Those words, brief and unembellished, hit harder than any tabloid headline. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. To the outside world, this was a moment that could be dismissed as awkward, a misunderstanding, perhaps. But for Meghan, whose entire post-royal existence had been built on optics, it was catastrophic. Why would a woman like Viola Davis deny a seemingly harmless request for a photo op? And why would Meghan risk everything by attempting such a public maneuver? To understand the weight of that moment, one must peel back the layers of both women's stories. Viola Davis represents authenticity, a life carved out of struggle, discipline, and talent that could not be ignored. She is celebrated not for scandal, not for proximity to power, but for her undeniable mastery of her craft. Meghan Markle, on the other hand, has spent years entangled in the contradictions of her own narrative, half royal, half celebrity, never fully accepted in either world. This wasn't just a case of one star declining a picture. It was a symbolic clash between two very different approaches to legacy. Viola's "I don't know you" was not merely a statement of fact. It was a statement of principle. In Hollywood, authenticity is rare and fiercely protected. The industry is full of fleeting alliances and opportunistic encounters. Viola, who has worked her way up with no shortcuts, was never going to compromise her integrity by being used as a prop in Meghan's ongoing quest for Hollywood legitimacy. Meghan's desire for validation, on the other hand, has been an open secret. Every move she makes, whether a podcast, a television appearance, or a public outing, seems steeped in strategy. She has built her brand around association, carefully curating who she stands beside, what causes she supports, and how the cameras capture her. This is not unusual in Hollywood, but when it fails, the failure is merciless. The introduction of this story must confront the uncomfortable truth about Meghan's journey. She has long sought to position herself as a woman of influence, a voice of compassion, and a player in elite circles. Yet every attempt is scrutinized, and every misstep magnified. The rejection by Viola Davis was not just humiliating, it was telling. It signaled that Meghan's desperation had reached a point where others in Hollywood were beginning to notice, and more importantly, beginning to push back. If Viola, a figure known for her kindness and professionalism, could not be swayed, what did that say about the perception Meghan now carries within the industry? As the cameras continued to flash and the whispers spread across the red carpet, the weight of the moment became evident. This was not the kind of rejection one could brush aside with a polite laugh. Meghan's smile faltered just enough for observers to catch it. Her body stiffened just enough for critics to analyze it. She had walked into that hall expecting a victory, but what she received was a public reminder that her strategy of forced proximity was wearing thin. The humiliation stung not because of the cameras, but because the rejection came from Viola, someone Meghan could never believably dismiss as irrelevant or out of touch. Viola was the embodiment of everything Meghan aspired to be seen as: respected, authentic, and loved. The beginning of this exposé asks one question: what drives a person to such desperation that they risk humiliation for a photo? The answer lies in Meghan's trajectory since leaving the royal family. She and Prince Harry entered Hollywood with grand promises: a $100 million Netflix deal, a Spotify podcast empire, speaking engagements that framed them as voices of change. But beneath the glittering headlines were cracks, failed projects, waning influence, and a constant battle to prove relevance. Every public appearance became less about the event itself and more about whether Meghan could cement her place among the true Hollywood elites. And so, in her eyes, a photo with Viola Davis was more than just a snapshot. It was a lifeline. But what Meghan underestimated was the very essence of Viola Davis. Viola does not play into desperation. She has no need to lend her credibility to someone else's image. For her, the power lies in staying true to herself, in resisting the transactional nature of Hollywood relationships. Viola's refusal was not malicious. It was natural, instinctive. Yet for Meghan, it was devastating. The cameras captured not just the rejection but the symbolism behind it. One woman standing firmly on her earned pedestal, and another scrambling for recognition in a world that seems increasingly resistant to her presence. The middle of this introduction delves into the larger implications of that moment. It wasn't just about Meghan and Viola. It was about what the moment revealed regarding fame, validation, and authenticity in Hollywood. Fame, when pursued desperately, often slips further away. Validation, when begged for, becomes harder to attain. Authenticity, when forced, collapses under scrutiny. Meghan's approach to celebrity has been a careful construction, but construction alone cannot replace substance. Viola Davis embodies substance, which is why the clash between these two women resonated so powerfully with the audience. For every fan defending Meghan, there were critics pointing out that her desperation had finally shown itself too clearly. As the story closes its opening arc, the focus sharpens on what lies ahead. This was not just a one-night scandal to be forgotten with the next news cycle. It was a pivotal moment, a turning point in Meghan's narrative. Hollywood's patience for contrived appearances is thin, and Viola's rejection crystallized a truth that many had suspected. Meghan's path to lasting relevance would not be through opportunistic photo ops, but through the hard, patient work of proving herself. Whether she is capable of that remains to be seen. And so the introduction ends as it began, with a question: what happens when desperation collides with integrity in front of the world's cameras? The answer is a story that will unfold across many chapters, one that reveals not only Meghan's struggles, but also the ruthless nature of fame itself. The night of the 27th Television Hall of Fame honoree ceremony was more than a celebration. It was a declaration. The very air seemed to hum with anticipation, as though every camera, every whispered conversation, and every careful step on the carpet carried the weight of history. For Hollywood insiders, this was not merely another awards ceremony. It was the night where legends were carved into stone, where the industry stopped to honor its greatest contributors. The Walk of Fame stars glittered under the lights, limousines lined up in a perfectly orchestrated rhythm, and publicists held their breaths, prepared for both triumph and damage control. Among the honorees stood Viola Davis, a woman whose journey through the entertainment industry had become a beacon of resilience, excellence, and authenticity. She was no longer just an actress. She was an institution. Her presence commanded reverence, and the crowd reflected that with every flashbulb and gasp. Journalists scribbled frantically, red carpet hosts jockeyed for position to get her words, and every camera seemed magnetized toward her radiant smile. Viola was the gravitational center of that evening. But lurking behind the brilliance of that spotlight was a shadow, an uninvited tension ready to erupt into something unforgettable. When Meghan Markle entered the scene, the atmosphere shifted. There is something peculiar about her presence that always seems to trigger extremes. Adoration from some, suspicion from others, but rarely indifference. Meghan walked with deliberate grace, the kind of walk one perfects after years of being scrutinized by cameras. The dress was elegant, calculated to flatter yet command attention, while her expression bore the polished serenity of someone who has rehearsed every possible angle in the mirror. But beneath that serenity was hunger. She had come to this event not just to watch history, but to insert herself into it. Observers noted that Meghan's entrance wasn't coordinated with Harry at her side. It was deliberate, a solo appearance, the kind meant to remind Hollywood that she is not merely an appendage of a royal narrative, but a figure who insists on standing in her own spotlight. Yet the challenge she faced was clear. Unlike Viola Davis, Meghan had not earned her place in that room through decades of acclaimed artistry. Her presence was not a coronation of a career, but a negotiation of her relevance. And in Hollywood, where authenticity and legacy are currency, her wealth was thin. The night unfolded like an opera, filled with crescendos of applause, glittering speeches, and carefully staged moments for the cameras. Celebrities mingled, laughing loudly, hugging tightly, their conversations punctuated by photographers capturing every smile. Yet whispers trailed through the crowd as Meghan strategically navigated her way toward Viola Davis. Some saw it as ambition, others as desperation. Either way, it was impossible to ignore. The contrast between Viola and Meghan in that moment was stark. Viola was the embodiment of triumph, standing tall in her rightful place among legends, a woman whose journey from poverty to Hollywood acclaim symbolized resilience. Meghan, on the other hand, was a woman fighting to be recognized beyond the shadow of royal titles and controversies. She was no stranger to the mechanics of fame. She understood how a single photograph could spin headlines, how one association could reshape perception. A picture with Viola would be more than just a snapshot. It would be a carefully staged narrative. Meghan, the Duchess who had been embraced by Hollywood's most authentic star. But as the night inched toward that fateful moment, something lingered in the air. Hollywood has always been a theater of performances, yet it has a way of detecting the forced from the genuine. Viola Davis, celebrated for her honesty both on and off screen, was not the kind of person to feign friendship or play into someone else's PR strategy. And so, when Meghan made her move, the night, up until then defined by applause and celebration, was thrown into an unforgettable silence. Imagine the scene, the carpet alive with shouts from photographers, flashes exploding like lightning across a darkened sky, and then a sudden hush as Meghan drew near. Viola, radiant and poised, stood waiting for her next media question when she turned to find Meghan stepping closer. The Duchess carried the well-practiced smile of someone who thrives on performance, but there was no hiding the intent in her eyes. She wanted a moment, a photo, a seal of approval from one of Hollywood's greatest. What followed has already entered the realm of infamy. Viola did not step forward to embrace her, did not indulge the cameras with a contrived display of warmth. Instead, her words sliced through the noise, clear and uncompromising. "I don't know you." It was not said with cruelty, but with the kind of honesty that stops everything in its tracks. 1,000 interpretations erupted in that instant. Was it shade? Was it dismissal? Or was it simply truth? The ambiguity made it all the more powerful. Around them, the crowd reacted with that peculiar mix of fascination and discomfort. Some gasped, others smirked, and still others pretended not to notice, as though ignoring the moment would make it disappear. But it would not disappear. In that one sentence, Viola Davis had drawn a line in the sand. She would not be a prop for someone else's desperate bid at relevance. For Meghan, the impact was immediate. The smile lingered on her face, but it was strained, the kind of smile one wears when holding back humiliation. Her body stiffened just slightly, enough for critics to seize upon later, enough for commentators to freeze frame and analyze endlessly. She had gambled everything on that moment, and it had slipped through her fingers in the most public way possible. The rest of the evening carried on as if nothing had happened. Viola continued her celebration, delivering gracious words and basking in well-earned recognition. While Meghan retreated into the shadows, her team no doubt scrambling to calculate the damage. But the incident had already taken root. Within hours, it would be trending across social media, dissected by entertainment pundits, mocked in memes, and debated endlessly on talk shows. What began as a flawless night for Hollywood legends had been hijacked by a brief but unforgettable collision between desperation and integrity. This first chapter of the story sets the stage for everything that follows. It was not simply about one celebrity denying another a photo op. It was about the symbolism of that denial, the way it exposed the fragility of Meghan's standing in Hollywood and the unshakable strength of Viola's. It was about authenticity refusing to be compromised by opportunism. And it was about the spectacle of fame itself, how one unscripted moment can eclipse hours of carefully planned celebration. Meghan Markle has never been a stranger to spectacle. Every entrance she makes carries an undercurrent of intent, the awareness that eyes will follow, lenses will capture, and narratives will form around her presence. The 27th Television Hall of Fame honoree ceremony was no exception. From the moment she stepped out of her car, the choreography of her arrival was carefully designed. She didn't simply walk the red carpet. She orchestrated it, as though every movement had been plotted in advance. For Meghan, appearances are never random. They are strategy, a delicate dance of positioning herself within a hierarchy she has been desperate to climb. Her arrival had the telltale signs of a calculated performance. The outfit, a sleek ensemble that managed to balance elegance with a hint of understated glamour, was chosen not just for beauty but for message. Meghan has long relied on clothing as part of her silent storytelling. Every shade, cut, and accessory signals something, whether it's solidarity, defiance, or aspiration. On this night, she aimed for the image of a Hollywood insider, sophisticated yet accessible, glamorous yet purposeful. It was not the attire of a guest in awe of the moment, but of someone attempting to own the moment. But clothing alone does not secure a narrative. Meghan's demeanor was equally rehearsed. She smiled in a way that suggested confidence without arrogance, waved sparingly so as not to appear desperate, and maintained the kind of composure that comes from years of practicing under relentless royal scrutiny. Yet for those who have watched her closely, there were hints of something deeper, an almost restless energy beneath the polished exterior. Her eyes darted, scanning the crowd, not for old friends or familiar faces, but for opportunities. Who could she be photographed with? Whose orbit could she step into? Where was the next opening to cement her relevance? Observers who were there that night later recalled that Meghan's entrance felt oddly detached from the event itself. While others walked the carpet as participants in a collective celebration, Meghan carried herself like a woman on a mission. Her steps were too precise, her posture too calculated, her smile too constant. She wasn't simply present, she was presenting herself. In Hollywood, authenticity is an elusive currency, and audiences can detect when something feels forced. Meghan's calculated presence did not escape notice. This calculated approach to appearances has defined Meghan's trajectory ever since leaving the royal family. When she and Harry announced their decision to step back from their roles, they painted it as an escape into freedom, a chance to live authentically and pursue independent projects. Yet nearly every move since then has seemed orchestrated not toward authenticity, but toward crafting a new image. The Netflix deals, the podcasts, the speeches, all carefully curated opportunities to shape how the public perceives her. But the more curated her presence becomes, the harder it is for people to believe in its sincerity. And that skepticism has trailed her into every room, including this one. Hollywood is a peculiar world. It thrives on artifice, yet paradoxically worships authenticity. The stars who last are not the ones who strategize every smile, but those whose presence feels effortless, whose persona aligns seamlessly with their work. Viola Davis embodies this paradox perfectly. Her authenticity is her brand. Meghan's calculated entrance, by contrast, was the very opposite of effortless. It was the manifestation of strategy laid bare. And therein lies the tension. When one's desire to belong becomes too obvious, it risks becoming counterproductive. The psychology behind Meghan's calculated entrance is worth exploring. For years, she has lived in spaces where she felt the need to prove her worth. First as a biracial actress navigating Hollywood, then as a royal outsider in Britain, and now as a celebrity straddling two worlds without fully belonging to either. This constant battle for validation creates a mindset where every move must serve a purpose. To those watching, it reads as desperation, but to Meghan, it is survival. A single photograph, a single handshake, a single nod from the right person could be the difference between fading relevance and renewed influence. Her decision to attend the Hall of Fame event in the first place spoke volumes. Meghan had no professional ties to the ceremony, no history of contribution to television that warranted her being there. Yet she appeared, positioning herself within a space dominated by legends. It was not about honoring television's greats. It was about placing herself in their company, absorbing some of their legitimacy by mere proximity. It was about optics, about aligning her name with theirs, about being photographed in the same frame as Hollywood royalty. As she made her way through the crowd, Meghan employed her signature strategy. Hover near the centers of attention, wait for the cameras to converge, then step in at just the right moment. This was not unfamiliar territory for her. She had done it before, during fashion events, charity galas, and public appearances with Harry. The tactic is simple but effective. Proximity equals credibility. If one is seen alongside the admired, the assumption is that one belongs. Yet the flaw in this strategy is that it only works when those admired figures allow the proximity. If they resist, the result is not elevation but humiliation. This was the gamble Meghan was willing to take that night. Her calculated entrance was not just about walking into a building. It was about maneuvering herself into Viola Davis's orbit. She knew the value of that association. Viola was not just another celebrity. She was an icon, someone whose recognition would mean more than 1,000 tabloid covers. A photo with Viola would signal acceptance from Hollywood's elite, a stamp of authenticity Meghan had long craved. And so, every step, every smile, every calculated pause along the red carpet was building toward that goal. But calculation has its limits. While Meghan maneuvered with precision, others in the room could sense the intention. Hollywood thrives on subtlety, and when the intent becomes too visible, it undermines the effort. The whispers began before Meghan even approached Viola. People noticed her scanning the room, her persistence in edging closer, her unwillingness to simply enjoy the evening as a guest. To some, it was ambition. To others, it was desperation laid bare. The irony of Meghan's calculated entrance lies in its ultimate failure. For all the effort to craft the perfect narrative, for all the energy invested in orchestrating her presence, the result was not admiration but rejection. Viola Davis, steadfast in her authenticity, became the immovable wall against which Meghan's strategy collapsed. And in that collision, Meghan's calculated entrance transformed from a demonstration of control into a display of vulnerability. By the end of the night, the calculation that had defined Meghan's presence was no longer invisible. It was the story itself. Commentators dissected her every move. Critics highlighted her relentless pursuit of validation, and the public was left to wonder, at what point does calculation cease to be strategy and become self-sabotage? To understand the magnitude of what happened that night, one must first understand who Viola Davis is and why her reaction carried such extraordinary weight. Viola is not merely an actress, nor is she just another Hollywood figure with accolades and red carpet appearances. She is a towering figure of authenticity in an industry often criticized for its superficiality. Her life, her career, and her philosophy represent the very opposite of manufactured stardom. And that is why her presence at the 27th Television Hall of Fame honoree ceremony was so powerful, and why her refusal to play into Meghan's maneuvering struck such a chord. Viola's story begins far from the glamour of Hollywood. She was born in South Carolina and raised in Rhode Island, in a world defined by poverty, hardship, and limited opportunities. Unlike many of her peers who entered the entertainment world through privilege or connections, Viola's journey was one of relentless struggle and persistence. She has often spoken openly about growing up hungry, about the humiliation of living in rat-infested apartments, and about the determination it took to rise above her circumstances. These formative years are not just background, they are the foundation of her authenticity. When Viola speaks, when she acts, when she commands a stage, she carries with her the weight of every battle she fought to stand there. Her training was rigorous, her pursuit of excellence uncompromising. Viola is a graduate of Juilliard, one of the most demanding conservatories in the world. Those who know her from those days recall a woman who did not take shortcuts, who demanded of herself the same discipline she expected from others. She understood that in a world where people doubted her because of her background, her race, or her appearance, talent alone would not suffice. She needed to be exceptional, undeniable. And she was. Her career is a catalog of performances that transcend entertainment. Whether it was her raw, heartbreaking role in Fences, her commanding presence in How to Get Away with Murder, or her unforgettable work in The Help, Viola's artistry has always been anchored in truth. She does not perform to please an audience. She performs to reveal humanity. This is what separates her from the machinery of Hollywood celebrity. For Viola, the craft is sacred. She has no need to chase validation through appearances or contrived alliances. Her validation comes from the work, and the respect she commands comes from that unwavering commitment. This philosophy has shaped her reputation within Hollywood. Viola is respected not just for her performances, but for her integrity. She speaks openly about racism in the industry, about the lack of representation, about the struggles that persist for women of color in Hollywood. She is not afraid to confront uncomfortable truths, even when doing so risks alienating powerful figures. In an industry where many play the game of silence and complicity, Viola's refusal to compromise has set her apart. She has become a symbol not just of excellence, but of courage. So when Viola Davis stands on a red carpet, she does not carry with her the need to validate herself through associations. She is the association. She does not need others to enhance her legitimacy. Her career and her story do that for her. And when someone like Meghan Markle approaches, attempting to fold Viola into a carefully staged narrative, Viola's instinct is not to comply, but to resist. Because for Viola, compliance with opportunism is a betrayal of the very principles that define her. It is important to note that Viola's rejection of Meghan was not rooted in hostility. It was rooted in clarity. Viola does not know Meghan, and she will not pretend otherwise for the sake of optics. To a woman like Meghan, who thrives on the construction of appearances, this refusal felt like a devastating blow. But to Viola, it was a natural response, consistent with everything she has stood for throughout her life. This is why the moment resonated so powerfully with the public. It was not about cruelty, it was about honesty. Hollywood insiders were not surprised by Viola's reaction. She has always been known as someone who does not play games with her reputation. In fact, many quietly admired her refusal to indulge Meghan's maneuver. In an environment where celebrities often pretend to be closer than they really are, where smiles and hugs are exchanged for the sake of photographs, Viola's unshakable stance was refreshing. It was a reminder that even in Hollywood, authenticity can prevail over strategy. The symbolism of Viola's rejection extended beyond that night. It highlighted a fundamental truth about fame: not all recognition is equal. Meghan has sought recognition through association, through curated appearances, through proximity to the powerful. Viola's recognition, by contrast, comes from authenticity and mastery. This distinction matters because it reveals why Viola's refusal carried so much weight. When someone who embodies authenticity refuses to play into a staged narrative, it exposes the fragility of that narrative. Meghan's attempt to leverage Viola's credibility backfired precisely because Viola's credibility is unshakable. For fans of Viola Davis, the incident only reinforced what they already knew about her character. They praised her for standing her ground, for refusing to be pulled into what they saw as Meghan's desperation. For Meghan's critics, the moment was confirmation of long-held suspicions that her approach to fame is built not on substance, but on spectacle, not on authenticity, but on calculation. And for neutral observers, it was a reminder of how quickly power dynamics can shift in Hollywood. A single unscripted moment can redefine perceptions overnight. Hollywood insiders were not surprised by Viola's reaction. She has always been known as someone who does not play games with her reputation. In fact, many quietly admired her refusal to indulge Meghan's maneuver. In an environment where celebrities often pretend to be closer than they really are, where smiles and hugs are exchanged for the sake of photographs, Viola's unshakable stance was refreshing. It was a reminder that even in Hollywood, authenticity can prevail over strategy. The symbolism of Viola's rejection extended beyond that night. It highlighted a fundamental truth about fame: not all recognition is equal. Meghan has sought recognition through association, through curated appearances, through proximity to the powerful. Viola's recognition, by contrast, comes from authenticity and mastery. This distinction matters because it reveals why Viola's refusal carried so much weight. When someone who embodies authenticity refuses to play into a staged narrative, it exposes the fragility of that narrative. Meghan's attempt to leverage Viola's credibility backfired precisely because Viola's credibility is unshakable. For fans of Viola Davis, the incident only reinforced what they already knew about her character. They praised her for standing her ground, for refusing to be pulled into what they saw as Meghan's desperation. For Meghan's critics, the moment was confirmation of long-held suspicions that her approach to fame is built not on substance, but on spectacle, not on authenticity, but on calculation. And for neutral observers, it was a reminder of how quickly power dynamics can shift in Hollywood. A single unscripted moment can redefine perceptions overnight. Viola's role in this story cannot be overstated. She was not merely a participant in Meghan's humiliation. She was the embodiment of the values that clashed with Meghan's tactics. Her life story, her career, her philosophy, and her reputation all converged in that single moment of refusal. It was not just Viola saying, "I don't know you." It was authenticity saying, "I will not be used." It was integrity saying, "I will not compromise." It was resilience saying, "I know who I am, and I do not need you to validate me." This is why the image of Viola Davis standing firm on that red carpet will be remembered long after the details of the event fade. She did not raise her voice, she did not create a scene, she did not lash out. She simply stated a truth that carried the weight of her entire journey. And in doing so, she reminded the world of something Hollywood often forgets: that the most powerful thing a person can be is authentic. The hum of cameras filled the air, their clicking rhythm like a relentless drumbeat marking every second of the evening. The red carpet had already witnessed countless handshakes, hugs, and poses, each star basking in their few moments of immortalization. Viola Davis was at the center of it all, the gravitational pull of the night, her aura commanding attention without effort. She stood draped in elegance, her every gesture a quiet declaration of authenticity. Around her, publicists moved like conductors, ensuring everything unfolded seamlessly. Yet even in the midst of this controlled chaos, a new tension began to brew. Meghan Markle was edging closer, step by careful step, her intent written across every movement. The approach was not sudden, it was incremental, calculated. Meghan didn't storm into Viola's space. Instead, she maneuvered as though rehearsing a chess game, moving first into the periphery, then inching closer, waiting for the perfect alignment of cameras. This was the art of insertion, appearing casual while orchestrating every second. She lingered near conversations that would draw photographers, positioned herself where the backdrop would look most flattering, and adjusted her expression into a mask of calm charm. But anyone watching closely could sense the drive beneath the performance. She was not there to simply observe. She was there to capture a moment that could alter the narrative of her career. Observers noted how Meghan's eyes betrayed her strategy. While her lips curved in polite smiles, her gaze was sharp, scanning for opportunity. Viola was her target, and Meghan was determined to make the connection. She waited for pauses in Viola's interactions, moments between interviews, gaps in the flow of attention. Timing was everything. Meghan knew that if she walked up too aggressively, the move would look desperate. If she hesitated too long, the chance might slip away. It was a balancing act, a test of precision. But even in her calculated patience, the intention was visible. Those who watched felt the air thicken with anticipation. The dynamics of the approach are crucial to understanding what happened next. In Hollywood, proximity is a form of power. To be photographed beside someone is to share their light, to borrow their legitimacy, to be seen as part of their world. Meghan understood this better than most. She had built her trajectory on proximity, whether to royals, celebrities, or cultural icons. A photo with Viola would not just be an image, it would be a symbol, one that told audiences, I belong here. I am part of this echelon. And so, each step Meghan took toward Viola carried with it the weight of her aspirations. But there was another dynamic at play, Viola Davis herself. Unlike many in Hollywood, Viola does not mistake proximity for authenticity. She has built her reputation on truth, on refusing to play the games that reduce art and integrity to publicity stunts. As Meghan approached, Viola's body language reflected her clarity. She was gracious with the press, warm with colleagues, but her demeanor shifted subtly when she sensed Meghan nearing. She did not lean forward to welcome, nor did she signal openness for a staged embrace. Instead, she held her ground, her poise unshaken, her eyes steady. She was prepared, not to lash out, but to refuse what she would not allow. The crowd's awareness of the moment heightened the tension. Conversations dulled, glances darted, cameras shifted. Journalists and photographers, seasoned in reading unspoken dynamics, picked up on the impending collision. They adjusted their positions, eager to capture whatever would unfold. For them, drama is currency, and the convergence of Meghan Markle and Viola Davis promised a headline. The approach became theater, unscripted yet perfectly staged by circumstance. As Meghan closed the final gap, the world seemed to shrink to that single space between the two women. Meghan extended her trademark smile, the one that had once charmed audiences, press, and even royalty. Her posture leaned slightly forward, signaling openness, familiarity, the expectation of reciprocal warmth. In her mind, this was the moment to secure the photograph, the handshake, the embrace, something the cameras could seize as proof of her inclusion. But Viola did not reciprocate. She did not reach forward, did not step closer, did not bend into the performance Meghan was scripting. Instead, she remained anchored, her presence immovable, her authenticity untouchable. When she spoke, her words were not cruel, nor were they performative. They were simple, clear, and devastating in their honesty. I don't know you. The impact of those words was immediate, though subtle in appearance. Meghan's smile froze, her body stiffened almost imperceptibly, and the seconds stretched endlessly as the cameras captured every flicker of expression. The crowd reacted with the kind of collective gasp reserved for moments when truth pierces through performance. Some tried to mask their surprise, others leaned in to catch more, and still others exchanged knowing looks. They all understood what had happened. The beauty of Viola's refusal lay in its restraint. She did not humiliate Meghan with sarcasm, did not escalate the moment with dramatics. She simply stated the truth. Yet in the world of Hollywood, where appearances are currency and authenticity is rare, that truth was explosive. Meghan had approached with calculation, expecting compliance, but instead she met the immovable force of someone who could not be manipulated into her narrative. For Meghan, the approach had been everything. It was the culmination of her strategy, the centerpiece of her evening. But in a single sentence, Viola unraveled it all. The photograph Meghan sought, the validation she craved, the headlines she had anticipated, gone. What remained was a moment of exposure, captured by cameras, magnified by whispers, and destined to dominate conversations long after the night ended. The approach, therefore, was not just about Meghan stepping toward Viola Davis. It was about two worlds colliding, one built on strategy and calculation, the other rooted in authenticity and integrity. Meghan came armed with the tools of performance, but Viola stood grounded in truth. And truth, in that moment, proved unshakable. There are moments in public life that seem to expand far beyond their immediate setting, moments where the weight of silence, the sharpness of a phrase, or the shift in a single expression reverberates louder than any speech. The rejection Meghan Markle experienced that evening when Viola Davis told her, "I don't know you," was one of those moments. It was not scripted, it was not rehearsed, and it was not softened for the cameras. It unfolded raw and unfiltered, in front of the lenses that never miss a twitch, and in the presence of witnesses who instantly understood they were seeing something extraordinary. The red carpet, up until then a parade of poise and glamour, froze in collective astonishment. The cameras clicked on, as they always do, indifferent to the discomfort of those caught in their gaze. The photographers didn't care about embarrassment, they cared about the story. And in that instant, Meghan was the story. Her smile had faltered for just a second, her eyes flickered in disbelief, and her posture shifted into stiffness. For the trained eye, it was the textbook body language of rejection, micro-expressions betraying what her carefully rehearsed demeanor tried desperately to conceal. Witnesses later described the silence that followed as unlike anything they had experienced at such a high-profile event. It was not the silence of a pause between interviews or the lull before a speech. It was the silence of discomfort, of recognition, of a truth too heavy to ignore. People averted their eyes out of politeness, but they could not escape the gravity of the moment. The whispers began almost immediately, spreading through the crowd like sparks in dry grass. Did she really say that? Did you see Meghan's face? Viola just refused her. Each whisper carried both awe and disbelief, fueling the momentum of what would soon become headline news. For Meghan, the rejection was more than just a personal slight. It was a public dismantling of her strategy. She had approached Viola with the expectation that the cameras would capture a moment of unity, of celebrity sisterhood, of Meghan being embraced by Hollywood's royalty. Instead, the cameras captured distance, detachment, and denial. The image of Meghan's forced smile against Viola's composed refusal told a story far louder than any publicist could spin. It was the story of desperation colliding with authenticity, of performance meeting immovable truth. The power of the rejection lay not only in Viola's words, but in her delivery. She did not raise her voice, did not scowl, did not dramatize. She simply stated, with calm firmness, "I don't know you." The simplicity made it devastating. Had she laughed it off, it might have softened the blow. Had she engaged Meghan politely and moved on, the cameras would have captured a neutral interaction. But by refusing to participate in the charade, Viola amplified the rejection tenfold. It was not personal malice, it was clarity. And clarity in such a setting is lethal. The crowd's reaction compounded the humiliation. Some celebrities smirked, their expressions betraying a sense of satisfaction at watching the Duchess falter. Others shook their heads, sympathetic but unwilling to intervene. The journalists and photographers, however, were relentless. They captured every second, their shutters firing in a frenzy. They knew this was gold, an unscripted moment of drama in a world that thrives on spectacle. And as Meghan attempted to recover, to plaster on a smile that would signal grace under pressure, the damage was already done. The moment had been immortalized. Social media lit up within minutes. Guests who had recorded snippets shared them, journalists tweeted cryptic updates, and fans speculated wildly. Clips circulated, slowed down and zoomed in to capture Meghan's falter, Viola's expression, the awkward space between them. Memes appeared before the night was even over, exaggerating the exchange, framing it as a clash of queens, a duel of authenticity versus ambition. The internet thrives on contrast, and here it was in its purest form. Viola, poised and authentic, versus Meghan, desperate and exposed. The narrative wrote itself. The rejection was not only about Meghan failing to secure a photo op. It was symbolic of her broader struggle for acceptance in Hollywood. She had left the royal family with the promise of building an independent identity, a global platform rooted in compassion and influence. Yet every attempt seemed to falter under scrutiny. Projects were canceled, public opinion wavered, and critics accused her of being more concerned with fame than substance. This moment with Viola became the perfect metaphor for that struggle. Hollywood's most respected icon refused to validate her, and the world was watching. What made the rejection even more cutting was its contrast to Meghan's past experiences. In the royal world, her presence had often been enough to secure applause, even when the relationship with the institution was fraught. In Hollywood, however, applause is not guaranteed. It must be earned. Proximity alone does not suffice. Viola's refusal underscored this harsh reality. Meghan could not borrow legitimacy simply by standing beside Viola. She had to prove her own, and in that moment, she failed. For Meghan, the internal fallout must have been overwhelming. She had built her entrance around this approach, rehearsed her smile, calculated her timing, and pinned her hopes on capturing an image that would ripple across headlines. Instead, the story that emerged was one of rejection. The humiliation was not just personal. It was public, replayed endlessly in clips and discussed in tones of pity, disdain, or mockery. And because it was Viola Davis, the unshakable icon of authenticity, the rejection could not be dismissed as trivial. It carried moral weight. The public rejection also highlighted the precariousness of Meghan's standing. Had this happened with a lesser-known figure, perhaps the narrative could have been spun as a misunderstanding. But with Viola, there was no room for such excuses. Viola's reputation for integrity made her refusal indisputable. The world believed her when she said, "I don't know you." And in believing her, they questioned Meghan. As the night wore on, Meghan tried to recompose herself, but the moment had already slipped from her control. The rest of her appearances that evening felt muted, overshadowed by the earlier clash. Every smile looked forced, every wave seemed strained. The cameras, once a tool she wielded with precision, had turned against her. They no longer captured her as the orchestrator of narrative, but as the subject of one she could not control. This chapter leaves us with the image of Meghan caught in the cruelest spotlight of all, the spotlight of rejection. Her attempt at validation had unraveled in front of the very audience she sought to impress. The cameras that once elevated her had betrayed her, and the public, hungry for spectacle, had seized upon the moment as evidence of her desperation. Viola's calm refusal became an unshakable truth in a world built on performance. Meghan's public rejection was complete, undeniable, and unforgettable. The power of rejection often lies not in the words spoken, but in the silence that follows them. When Viola Davis uttered those four devastating words, "I don't know you," Meghan Markle's carefully constructed performance cracked. For someone who had trained herself to wear a mask of composure, the fracture was subtle but undeniable. A smile that had once seemed effortless now appeared strained. Her eyes, usually alive with practiced warmth, darted as if searching for an escape. Her body language stiffened, betraying the tension coursing through her. This was not the response she had anticipated, and the weight of it bore down on her with merciless speed. Meghan's shock was visible in the way she froze, caught mid-motion as though her body refused to process what had just happened. She had approached Viola with confidence, every step calculated, every gesture rehearsed. She expected reciprocity, the acknowledgement that would be immortalized in photographs and headlines. Instead, she received rejection delivered with the calm authority of a woman who had nothing to prove. The sudden inversion of control left Meghan exposed, a performer caught off script in front of an unforgiving audience. For the photographers, the freeze was a gift. Their cameras captured every flicker of Meghan's reaction, every subtle tightening of her jaw, every blink that lingered too long. These were not the polished images her team had hoped to secure. These were the kind of raw, unscripted moments that tabloids crave. A smile faltering, a gaze dropping, a stiffened stance. These were visual cues of humiliation, and once captured, they became permanent. No amount of spin could erase what the world had already seen. Inside Meghan's mind, the calculations must have raced. Should she laugh it off, pretend it was a misunderstanding? Should she push forward, insisting on warmth despite the refusal? Or should she retreat, preserving what little dignity remained? In those seconds of paralysis, every option seemed dangerous. To press on would risk further rejection. To retreat would confirm her defeat. The freeze was her instinctive response, a desperate attempt to hold her ground while concealing her shock. But the cameras saw through it, as did the witnesses surrounding her. The psychology of humiliation is brutal. When someone invests so much in a performance, when they believe the narrative is already theirs, rejection is not just a denial, it is a collapse. Meghan had envisioned herself walking away from that evening with a new image, a photograph alongside Viola Davis that would circulate across the globe as proof of her belonging. That vision shattered in an instant, leaving behind not triumph but exposure. She was no longer in control of the narrative. Viola was. Observers later noted how Meghan's attempts to recover only amplified the awkwardness. She adjusted her hair, her smile, her posture, all the familiar gestures of someone trying to regain composure, but they appeared forced, mechanical. Her usual ability to glide seamlessly through public moments faltered. The crowd noticed, and the whispers grew louder. The more she tried to conceal her shock, the more visible it became. The freeze also symbolized something deeper. Meghan's growing isolation in Hollywood. This was not just a moment of personal embarrassment. It was a reflection of how precarious her position had become. In the royal world, rejection might have been softened or hidden by courtiers, by the institution, by protocols designed to protect the monarchy's image. In Hollywood, there is no such safety net. The cameras are merciless, the publicists self-serving, and the audience unforgiving. Meghan had walked into that hall believing she could control the narrative through strategy, but Viola's rejection revealed just how little control she truly had. The significance of the freeze lies in its symbolism. It was not only Meghan's body halting in shock, it was her broader trajectory grinding to a halt. Every step she had taken toward Hollywood legitimacy now seemed to crumble beneath her. If Viola Davis, one of the most respected figures in the industry, could reject her so publicly, what did that say about Meghan standing with others? The freeze was not just a reaction. It was a mirror reflecting her desperation back at her. For those who witnessed it, Meghan's stillness in that moment carried more meaning than words could. It was the stillness of realization, the recognition that she had been exposed. She had built her presence on careful calculation, on curating appearances, on weaving herself into narratives larger than her own. But calculation falters when authenticity refuses to play along. Viola's simple refusal had pulled away the veil, leaving Meghan's desperation visible for all to see. The emotional toll of such a moment is not easily dismissed. Meghan, accustomed to scrutiny, has faced criticism before, but this was different. This was not a tabloid rumor or a royal feud whispered behind palace walls. This was a public dismissal, an undeniable rejection delivered in real time before cameras and witnesses. And in that setting, Meghan's reaction, her freeze, became the defining image. It was not Viola's words alone that resonated, but Meghan's inability to respond, to adapt, to maintain the illusion of control. As the evening continued, Meghan attempted to move forward, to smile for other photographs, to engage in polite conversation. But the shadow of the freeze lingered. Every interaction was measured against that earlier humiliation, every smile scrutinized for signs of strain. The audience, both in the room and watching from afar, could not unsee what had happened. For many, it became the turning point of the evening, the moment that defined not just Meghan's night, but her broader struggle for acceptance. This chapter closes with Meghan standing in the aftermath of that rejection, her smile still on her lips, but her shock still in her eyes. The freeze had revealed more than she intended, exposing the vulnerability beneath the performance. It was a reminder that in Hollywood, no amount of calculation can shield one from the sting of authenticity. And in that clash, Meghan was left immobilized, her carefully constructed facade unraveling before the world. No sooner had the red carpet lights dimmed than the incident between Meghan Markle and Viola Davis exploded into the public domain. Hollywood is an ecosystem where whispers become news in minutes, and headlines are crafted before events even conclude. The cameras that had captured Meghan's frozen smile and Viola's steady refusal were already feeding those images to media outlets desperate for content. By the time the ceremony ended, the story was alive, and within hours, it had taken on a life of its own. The first ripple began on social media. Guests who had witnessed the exchange posted cryptic comments, short clips, and carefully worded insinuations. Tweets appeared that read, "Did anyone else see Viola just ice Meghan on the carpet? Or that was awkward. Meghan just got denied by Viola in front of everyone." These vague but tantalizing posts sparked curiosity, sending fans and critics alike scrambling for more details. Within minutes, hashtags like #Viola versus Meghan, #IDon'tKnowYou, and #RedCarpetFreeze trended worldwide. Entertainment journalists, trained to seize on viral moments, pounced. Blogs and gossip sites crafted stories almost immediately, each trying to frame the encounter in the most dramatic terms possible. Headlines screamed across feeds. Viola Davis rejects Meghan Markle in brutal red carpet snub. The Duchess denied. Meghan's humiliation in Hollywood. Viola's cold shoulder freezes Meghan's smile. The language was relentless, crafted to amplify the humiliation and draw readers into the spectacle. Television networks were not far behind. Morning talk shows dissected the incident as though it were a geopolitical crisis. Clips of Meghan's faltering smile played on repeat, slowed down to highlight every micro-expression. Panelists debated whether Viola's words had been intentional shade or a simple declaration of fact. Body language experts were invited to analyze Meghan's posture, her stiffened shoulders, her frozen grin. Psychologists were consulted on live air to discuss the emotional impact of public rejection. In a matter of hours, a brief exchange had been transformed into a cultural phenomenon. The memes arrived next, cruel and unrelenting. Images of Viola's calm face were paired with captions like "Unbothered Queen," while Meghan's frozen expression became the subject of endless parody. One widely shared meme showed a split screen. Viola captioned "Authenticity," and Meghan captioned "Desperation." Another depicted Meghan holding a sign reading, "Please let me stand next to you," while Viola's response bubble read, "I don't know you." The internet has always thrived on contrast, and this incident provided the perfect fuel. But the media storm was not confined to ridicule. It also sparked deeper conversations about celebrity culture, authenticity, and desperation. Commentators asked why Meghan, who once commanded the global stage as a royal, seemed so intent on validation through Hollywood elites. Others pointed out the irony of Meghan leaving royal life supposedly to escape scrutiny, only to seek out the same spotlight in different forms. For critics, the incident confirmed what they had long argued, that Meghan's public persona was built on strategy rather than substance. Supporters of Meghan rushed to defend her, framing the incident as exaggerated, taken out of context, or even maliciously spun by the press. They argued that Viola's words had been misinterpreted, that the moment was less dramatic than portrayed. Hashtags like #WeStandWithMeghan surfaced as fans pushed back against the wave of mockery. But the sheer volume of coverage made resistance difficult. The narrative had already crystallized. Meghan had sought validation, and Viola had refused to grant it. The media storm also drew in experts on branding and public relations. Analysts explained how a single unscripted moment could undermine months of calculated image building. They dissected Meghan's strategy, noting her reliance on proximity to powerful figures and questioning whether such tactics could sustain her in the long term. For them, Viola's rejection was not just gossip. It was a case study in the fragility of celebrity reputation. The fact that this analysis appeared in serious outlets only amplified the sense that Meghan's misstep was more than a passing embarrassment. It was a potential turning point. Internationally, the story spread with equal ferocity. British tabloids, long hostile to Meghan, treated the incident as vindication, plastering her frozen expression across their front pages. Headlines like "Hollywood turns on Meghan" and "No escape from rejection" dominated UK papers. In the United States, coverage was more divided, with some outlets defending Meghan and others reveling in the drama. In both markets, however, the story sold, and that ensured it would not fade quickly. For Meghan, the media storm was a nightmare. She had built her life around managing the narrative, ensuring that every appearance, every word, every image served her carefully constructed identity. Yet here was a moment she could not control, a moment that contradicted her strategy, amplified endlessly by media eager to expose her vulnerability. No publicist's statement, no Instagram post, no staged appearance could erase what millions had already seen. The storm also raised uncomfortable questions about her future. If one of Hollywood's most respected icons had refused to participate in her narrative, would others follow suit? Would Meghan find doors quietly closing, invitations quietly withheld, opportunities quietly slipping away? The industry thrives on perception, and perception was turning against her. The more the media amplified the rejection, the more Meghan appeared not as an equal to Hollywood's legends, but as an outsider struggling to belong. This chapter captures the essence of the storm, the way a brief, forward rejection spiraled into a global spectacle. It shows how media thrives on vulnerability, how narratives are shaped not by facts alone, but by perception, repetition, and exaggeration. Meghan's shock and freeze had been captured in stills and clips, but it was the media that transformed them into symbols of desperation, of rejection, of authenticity refusing to be staged. By the end of the week, the incident had etched itself into popular culture. People who had not watched the Hall of Fame ceremony knew about the rejection. People who cared nothing for royal drama suddenly had an opinion on Meghan's humiliation. The storm had consumed her image, reframing her in the public imagination not as a figure of power, but as a woman exposed. This is the danger of public life. One moment, one phrase, one refusal can undo years of effort. For Meghan, the media storm was more than embarrassing. It was a revelation of just how fragile her position had become. She had gambled everything on a single moment of validation, and instead, she became the subject of ridicule, analysis, and endless repetition. The media had crowned her with headlines, but it was not the crown she sought. It was the crown of humiliation, heavy and unrelenting. The rejection by Viola Davis was not an isolated incident, nor was it simply an awkward exchange blown out of proportion. To understand its weight, one must view it within the larger arc of Meghan Markle's relentless pursuit of legitimacy in Hollywood. Since stepping down from her royal duties and relocating to California, Meghan has lived in a constant tug-of-war between the image she wants the world to see and the reality that continues to shadow her. That reality is simple. Despite her fame, she has struggled to secure a place among Hollywood's most respected circles. The desperation began long before Viola's rejection. Even during her time as an actress on Suits, Meghan often spoke about her difficulties breaking into the Hollywood elite. She was not a household name, not an actress considered for leading roles, not someone who could call upon the gravitas of Hollywood's inner sanctum. Suits gave her visibility, but it did not launch her into stardom in the way Friends had done for Jennifer Aniston or Scandal had done for Kerry Washington. Meghan remained, in many eyes, a supporting actress searching for her big break. That break never came, not until her romance with Prince Harry catapulted her into global fame. That fame, however, was royal fame. It was built not on Hollywood's system of credibility, where years of hard work, awards, and peer respect confer status, but on her relationship with one of the most famous men in the world. In Britain, she became a duchess overnight. In Hollywood, she was still an outsider, and the industry has never been quick to forget origins. Many insiders saw her royal title as a shortcut, a leapfrog over the years of struggle others had endured. That perception, fair or not, clung to her and complicated her every move. When Meghan and Harry stepped back from royal life, the promise was that they would become independent voices, free to build their own empire of influence. Yet almost immediately, cracks showed in that vision. They signed massive deals with Netflix and Spotify, but execution faltered. The podcast with Spotify failed to deliver sustained success, eventually collapsing amid criticism that it lacked depth. Netflix, though still partnered with the couple, quietly scaled back expectations after initial hype did not translate into enduring viewership. Critics argued that Meghan's projects lacked authenticity, that they were driven by image rather than substance. These failures only heightened the perception that Meghan was desperate for relevance, chasing deals without the foundation to sustain them. It is in this context that her pursuit of validation from Hollywood icons makes sense. Meghan's strategy has often relied on proximity, being seen with the right people, photographed at the right events, positioned within the right circles. To her, a single photo with Viola Davis might have signaled that she had finally crossed into Hollywood legitimacy, that she was no longer just a duchess-turned-celebrity, but a peer of the industry's most respected figures. It was the same strategy she had attempted before. Aligning herself with Oprah Winfrey during the infamous interview, appearing alongside global figures at charity events, curating a friend circle that included A-listers like Serena Williams and Priyanka Chopra. Each move was designed to weave her into the fabric of Hollywood power. But desperation is difficult to conceal, and Hollywood is merciless in detecting it. The industry thrives on authenticity, and those who appear to claw their way into relevance often find themselves pushed further away. Meghan's calculated appearances, whether at galas, red carpets, or charity functions, have often been scrutinized not for what they celebrate, but for what they signal. Was she there for the cause, or for the cameras? Was she truly aligned with these figures, or merely using them for validation? The questions linger, and each rejection amplifies them. Viola Davis's refusal struck so deeply because it was the first time one of Hollywood's most respected icons publicly denied Meghan the association she sought. This was not a missed invitation or a canceled project. It was a face-to-face rejection, witnessed by cameras and immortalized in headlines. It symbolized the walls of Hollywood closing in, the reality that legitimacy cannot be manufactured through proximity alone. For Meghan, the rejection was not just humiliating. It was a reminder that the strategy she had relied on was collapsing. The desperation for legitimacy also reveals itself in Meghan's shifting narratives. At times, she presents herself as a humanitarian, focusing on causes of compassion and justice. At other times, she leans into her role as a celebrity, appearing at high-profile events, dressed in couture, performing for the cameras. And when those roles falter, she returns to the royal narrative, invoking her struggles within the monarchy as a means of garnering sympathy and solidarity. These shifts reflect a restless search for identity, a constant attempt to find the image that will grant her acceptance. But each shift also highlights the underlying desperation, the fear that without validation, her relevance will fade. Critics point out that Meghan's desperation for Hollywood legitimacy stands in contrast to Harry's approach. While Harry too has faced criticism, he often frames his work around causes that connect to his personal experiences: mental health, veterans, the Invictus Games. Meghan, by contrast, is seen as more focused on optics, on how each move shapes her image rather than on building something sustainable. Whether fair or not, this perception has taken root, and Viola's rejection became its most vivid illustration. What makes this desperation so striking is its irony. Meghan already possesses a level of fame most could never dream of. She is recognized across the globe, her name synonymous with modern royal drama, her face a staple of media coverage. Yet fame alone is not enough. In Hollywood, fame without legitimacy is hollow. It does not guarantee longevity, respect, or true influence. Meghan's quest has not been for fame. She already has it. Her quest has been for legitimacy, the kind that Viola Davis embodies. And that is precisely what was denied her. As the days after the rejection unfolded, Meghan's desperation became even more apparent. Her team scrambled to control the narrative, issuing no official statements, but quietly attempting to downplay the incident. Supporters suggested the exchange had been misinterpreted, that Viola's words were taken out of context. But the world had already drawn its conclusion. The silence from Meghan's camp only fueled speculation that they had no way to spin the humiliation into something redeeming. The desperation for Hollywood legitimacy is not just Meghan's personal battle. It is a reflection of a larger truth about fame. Legitimacy cannot be bought, borrowed, or staged. It must be earned, cultivated through years of consistent work, authenticity, and respect. Viola Davis possesses it in abundance, which is why her rejection of Meghan resonated so profoundly. It was not just one woman denying another a photo op. It was legitimacy refusing to be co-opted by desperation.